second roundtable.
Pascal, thank you very much, and for all of our panelists and viewers from across France and the rest of Europe. When it became clear that coming out of university, our rock band was never going to become the next U2 or Radiohead, I had to come up with another plan. I had no idea that my name would be associated with one of the three major world university rankings. As the S of QS and their World University Rankings. Even beyond that, I helped Times Higher Ed to launch their own World University Rankings and different projects with fashion schools. But I do passionately believe in the positive impact of education and its potential to build a better world. Above all, I'm a European, whatever my British passport may claim since the 1st of January. So however deep that disappointment with Brexit, and after enduring 4 very long years of an inward-looking White House administration, I believe that the years ahead have the potential to be a golden age for higher education in Europe, which is why I'm so grateful to the Maison de l'Europe and to Pascal and the team at Pool for inviting me to moderate this roundtable on the future of European higher education. I also want to thank them for providing me with such a wonderful mix of thoughtful and engaging panelists who bring such rich international experience and ideas for today's discussion. I'm joined by Cécile Blondel, the Director of International Development at Gobelin, l'École de l'Image, which is the world-renowned creative school that is a pipeline of talent for Pixar, Disney, and the world of animation. Beyond a troubling obsession that Cécile has with crime literature and Alfred Hitchcock, I believe, she has 2 passions, education and the arts. Her career has taken her from teaching in secondary school and lecturing at St Andrews in Scotland to work with Her Majesty's Foreign and Commonwealth Office and International Affairs, and then to her alma mater Sciences Po and the role that she now has at Gobelin. Eric Cassan is a professor and vice president of European activities at Université Paris-Saclay. With a PhD from Paris Sud, even the focus of Eric's research has looked through the scientific lens of interconnections, including collaborative European projects on optical chip interconnectivity. So with his role at one of Europe's most ambitious higher education projects of the past decade, Paris-Saclay, now recognized among the world's top 15 universities by the Shanghai ranking, I look forward to his perspectives on the future of higher education in Europe. Patrick Levy also joins us. He was the president of the Université Grenoble-Alpes until January of 2020. He chairs the European Committee of the CPU, which is the Conference of University Presidents. And for the past 2 years, he's been a member of the board of directors of the UAE, the European University Association. Having directed the sleep laboratory at Grenoble University Hospital for over 20 years, I'm counting on Patrick. I'm sure he knows the best way to keep our audience wide awake for the next 90 minutes. From Munich, we're joined by Axel Honsdorf, who is the director of the Franco-Bavarian University Cooperation Center, BFrance. What began a little over 20 years ago as a venture that involved 2 universities, the University Ludwig Maximilian and Technische Universität München, TUM. It now involves 11 Bavarian universities that collaborate with French universities on partnerships and research, providing guidance for students and researchers, organizing events and financing various Franco-Bavarian university projects. And then finally, from Kosminski University in Warsaw, Gregor Mazurek, who brings the business school perspective to today's roundtable discussion. As the rector of KU, which is one of the leading business schools in the Central European region. It's Triple Crown accredited and highly ranked in the Financial Times. He brings his own professorial background, specializing in areas of digital transformation, e-commerce, and e-marketing, which will also feature in how we get the institutions to an international audience. He has some great perspectives on the rankings, which will be part of today's discussion. So, Cécile, I'd like to start with you first, and perhaps you could share a little with the audience the journey that you have taken Gobelin, finding yourself with a qualification that wasn't necessarily recognized by Pixar or by Disney, certainly for students that needed a visa to head off to the West Coast. Talk to us a little bit about how the Bologna Accords created this loophole that you were able to take advantage of.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt. Hello to everybody. So I'm Cécile. I'm the head of international development of Gobelin, which is a school. We deal with everything that is about images, from animation to photography to motion design, so digital technology. Our degrees, when I arrived, that was 10 years ago at school, our degrees were RNCP, which is National Registry for Professional Skills, which is recognized by the French Ministry of Industry, but not recognized by the Ministry of Education. It's now been recognized by the Ministry of Education, but at the time it was not. So my mission was to internationalize the school, and then when I was going abroad, I was talking about the recognition from the RNCP, and everybody was looking at me with a moment of silence. So the visibility of the degrees, although the reputation of the school was super good, and that's what I was discussing with Matt. We were more recognized thanks to our graduates than thanks to our degrees. The visibility was more like this. There was a need to bring international students to the school because the main mission of our school, since it's an applied art school, is to provide a training that allows students or graduates to work and to be immediately operational for work. And our objective is that we have a maximum of people employed within 6 months of graduation. So it's very industry focused. And at the time, there was a change in the industry. Our school was great, but being a little bit Franco-French, if I can say that. So there was a real need for the students and for the school to internationalize. But RNCP degrees was so obscure for the rest of the world that I finally found a little loop, which was RNCP degrees were recognized level 1, which is master officially by the state, but we could have a degree called Master of Arts given by the school if it was taught in English, which was great because what I wanted to do was to bring international students in. So we created 2 tracks, a Francophone track and an Anglophone track. And in 2016, we brought in a new class of 16 different nationalities to the school. It worked really well. There's also a big question of promoting co-production in the industry, so and multicultural co-production for structural reasons of an industry that is really global now. And so now we are going to be 50-50 Francophone and Anglophone students over a degree, which is now Bologna format, 3+2. And this has been a great, the fact that we're transforming to the Bologna format has had a numerous advantage for our students, for the school as well. Well, if it has numerous advantage for the students, that means that it has numerous advantage for the school, because we attracted more international students. It's in animation, there's a process of sharing, inspirations, cultural inspirations. So we got the quality of the film was different, more diverse, more attractive. We got, awards from the main academies in the US and in the UK. So more recognition for our films and students that are graduates, that are now able to work all around the world. There was also a visa issue. Since our graduates are people that are most of them will work on projects all around the world. There's let's say there's a animated feature film which is done in Ireland. They will work, 3-4 years on this film, and then they will work on another project in the US, and then they will work on another project, let's say in Japan. So they are nomad. It's the way the industry is built up. And if they wanted to have a visa in Japan or in the US, EHEA wasn't sounding right for the immigration authorities. The Bologna process allows this recognition also for young graduates who are beginning a career, because since then the visas are more, the programs are more visible, understandable all around the world, and it's a lot easier for our young professional to apply for visas, which is super important for them, since they be traveling around.
Right. Now, Cécile brings in ideas of recognition and also collaboration. Eric, I remember visiting what was to become the campus of Paris-Saclay with the education correspondent at the BBC. It was a big field, but everything was there to achieve. Tell us a little bit about a level of collaboration with so many different entities and institutions involved, what you set yourself as a vision, and perhaps also what you feel that you've achieved.
Okay, thank you very much for this nice invitation to this roundtable. So indeed, I am Eric Cassan from Paris-Saclay University. I'm the Deputy Vice President of the University in charge of the European affairs. So I have understood that today we have a quite informal, let's say super exciting but quite informal roundtable. So Paris-Saclay is I can sum up, perhaps summarize in a few words. Paris-Saclay has been launched, let's say in 2008, something like that, 12 or 13 years ago, but there have been already several steps. So to sum up very quickly, since January 1st, 2020, so last year, only 1 year ago, we have indeed created a university, so through a new status, through the ministry programs and so on, okay? And indeed, this is a grouping of faculties, engineering schools of pretty high engineering schools in France, with many faculties and many, of course, many topics. And also we have a very strong presence of the national research organizations, CEA, CRS, INSERM, and so on. So this is a very specific focus of the university with many research platforms and so on. We can tell also that during this process, in the last years, especially between 2015 and 2020, there have been some hot topics and probably stronger, more difficult periods in the process of the transformation, internal transformation of the university. But at last, these steps have been passed successfully, and now we are in a framework which is strong enough to continue the internal transformation, because we have several challenges in terms of internal transformation, but we are already fully a university being able to address all the topics of the universities. But we are in line with most of the big universities, more or less in line with all the universities and perhaps the schools, but especially the universities. We want to address topics which are strongly related to the challenges of the society itself. We are strongly connected to the society. What we do is for the society, for the students, for the private stakeholders, for the private sphere, the private companies, but also in terms of education. We are strongly related, of course, to the programs of the European Commission, the Erasmus Plus Erasmus Plus program on the one side, and the No Ash 2020, and now Horizon Europe, and so on. But also we know that we have to address challenges at the local, at the regional, at the national, and at the European scale, and probably international scale. So we try, at the Paris-Saclay side, we try to address more or less all the topics, all these challenges at the same time. We are strong enough to do it for the time being, but we know that we are in a process which is ongoing, and we have in view different next steps. 2025 will be next step, and also in line with the European Commission, we also envision the 2030 step. So 2025 is the next step in which we will merge also with two universities, Université Versailles-Saint-Quentin and Université d'Evry. So two more universities in 2025. And we envision to draw the line towards 2030. And just in a few words, we coordinate a European alliance through the European University Initiative. And we are very proud to coordinate that university, which brings with us as a partner LMU from Munich. And and we strongly collaborate with the German colleagues, and also with all other colleagues from Sweden, Lund University, Porto in Portugal, and Szeged in Hungary. And let's say that we strongly rely on this European alliance to help also to the transformation of Paris-Saclay. And we see it as a very important and structuring tool for the next years. The European initiative is very, very important also in the landscape of Paris-Saclay.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we will look at the challenges, everything that you have achieved in those 13, 14 years. You know, it took Cambridge over 800 years with their college system. And you talk about the importance of alliances, of partnerships, which Axel, I guess, with your work with by France, is very much at the heart of what you do. What you've achieved between the region of Bavaria and with France. Talk to us a little bit about how that operates and what you feel how does that provide a win-win for the partner universities that are involved?
Thank you very much, Matt. First of all, we're a small service center. And perhaps you know that education in Germany is on the competence of the Länder, the regions. So that leads us sometimes to a very funny patchwork quilt in Germany. And that explains the existence of our little center, which is located at EHEA Munich, but we're working all the university landscape in Bavaria and with French institutions, research institutions, universities. So our hunting area is typical bilateral sector. And of the self-promotion, I just want to come back to this point of the Bologna process and what it means for us in Germany and what we observed. When we started Bologna, it was for quite a lot of people the end of civilization. So many presidents of universities complained to lose the made in Germany, the diplom engineer at this time. So many employers association complained. The parents complained, will you earn some money with an MA? What does it mean? And now, once bachelor-master system, ECTS, was introduced, we see the complaints stopped immediately, even in Germany. And now we have a new system, but what we recognize as well, it's not a universal tool, it's not a Leatherman, it's primarily a translation tool in our sphere. And the content which is inside still remains to the national and the university level. And this process told us in Bavaria and in Germany two lessons. And we understand that higher education is a service. So we have international KPIs and institutions are incompetent. So in competition. And that meant to the idea that sometimes we will have some few university lighthouses and many regional providers in the future. And this is a painful process to understand because everybody wants to be excellent. This is the term. And once you're in the field of internationalization, we have this observation, as Eric told, we have to raise visibility. So what we saw the last years, the building of international consortia, which try to be always on an equal value. And in this context, for instance, the project of the European University was mentioned before, which was an idea of President Macron, is very exciting because on this, I think it's about 40 European universities, so they try to reinvent internationalization in larger consortiums. We had this on the bilateral way, double diplomas. They are actually working quite well. And now we are going over and we have to face some other problems because we have a scale up from problems. How can I enroll students on this very same time all over Europe? What's going on with the pay fees? Practical things. And this is what, for the good students, we are looking for, because these are the students who are attracted by international paths. This is the good question. Can we solve this problem for the students? And however, I think this is a holistic process as well, because the universities have to ask some other questions as well. What is the profile of a European engineer, for example? What skills do they have, a lawyer, European lawyer? And this is perhaps a diabolic question, the qualification of a teacher, European teacher. It seems to be impossible for the moment, because it's so related on the state regimen. And these are all the questions for all the European universities at the same time. And I'm very excited to see how this initiative from the European Community Union will perhaps give us some more ideas. And hopefully all these universities will interlink and work together on this question, because even if you're in a consortium, we have to solve larger problems at this scale at the moment, I think so.
So Axel reminds us, Patrick, of sort of 11 years ago, the world crashing around us with the idea of the Bologna Accords. As a board member of the European University Association, that's what, over 800 members across 48 countries. As you reflect on how far we've come in the last 10 years, do you see a sort of a change in a level of sort of accepting, I'm sure, many of these details that we continue to challenge us and evolve, but do you think that we've really embraced and we're getting the most out of Bologna?
No, I think there is a very, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I mean, it's a pleasure being part of this panel. Well, I think that there are many progresses that have been made in the last decades, for sure. But actually, what has just been said is showing two things. One is the diversity of university. And something that we didn't mention is what we call the differentiation. Actually, Eric mentioned Paris-Saclay. That's also true for Grenoble or others. And we are actually working, and that's some of the standard in a sense, on what we call high-profile research universities. But we know that this doesn't summarize by far the different types of university that are existing in Europe or worldwide. So the first thing is that this standardization is extremely beneficial. That has been mentioned by Cécile. I mean, the survey that she mentioned is extremely important, interesting. I mean, creating master degrees and this recognition through Europe is essential, and that also be mentioned by Axel. On the other end, the question of visibility is something which is important for several reasons. One is what I would call the social utility, the social recognition by citizens and by states. And that's not something which is very clearly, I mean, there are many difficulties in that field, and that's true for the recognition by states. And we must say that most universities in Europe are still underfunded, according to what they have to do. And also, and that's something that which now is also extremely important for EU, for instance, the fact that the citizen recognize the social utility of universities. And that's what you could say, of course, it's to some extent it is obvious that the young want a job, for sure. And when you have a diploma, of course, you have more chance to get a job when you don't have any degree coming from universities. But on the other end, it's not only that, it's the fact that the missions of university are visible in terms of social transformation, in terms of the good that can be made from the different missions of university, including transfer, valorization, and of course the fact that you provide degrees to the youth and to the students. So my personal impression is that, and for instance at the EUA, we actually have a vision for 2030, which tries to encompass all these dimensions, and including the fact that what I didn't say, but it's of course extremely important, is that the whole system is actually based on core values that we have actually to struggle for. I mean, I didn't mention academic freedom or autonomy, but that's the basis on which we have to build. So to come back to your question, I think that we have to go, well, first of all, we have to strengthen the values that were the one of the Bologna process, and that's extremely important. But we probably have to go forward on the dimension of visibility, accessibility, of course, and also the fact that it's really more and more related to the society values and needs. And that's something we probably will discuss further in this panel.
Right. Yes, you bring up some of the different assessments, whether related to employability at a regional level, at a national and, of course, European level. Greg, from the perspective of Kosminski, you bring a voice of business schools. There are two American business schools that fight out the claim that they are the oldest business schools in the world. One is in Philadelphia, the other one is up in Hanover, New Hampshire. And yet, of course, neither of them. It's one of your partner schools in Paris that has a much better claim to be the world's oldest business school. But as you look at business schools within this wider education landscape, has Bologna meant something to business schools, or do you think that you've been forging your own path with the different programs and a level of visibility that you have in the international market anyway?
Thank you, Matt, for that question. Hello, dear colleagues. And yes, I have to say sorry for the very beginning. Thank you very much for having a chance to talk to you. I say sorry because everybody said it, but I have to also say to the point. Internationalization and creating smooth regulations across countries and across continents is something of utmost importance for education and for research. I have a great honor and privilege to represent Kosminski University, which is a private institution created 27 years ago. And after those 27 years, we are, according to Financial Times, the leading business school in Central and Eastern Europe. And I'm not saying that to say that we are great. I'm saying that because if you look at the categories and the variables of building the success of a business school, you have to be fully internationalized if you want to be successful. So what I try to tell, which is a blunt answer to your question, is that I wouldn't be with you if internationalization wouldn't be at the core of mission, vision, and strategy of Kosminski 27 years ago. That's the point number one. The point number two is I try to listen to you, dear colleagues, very, very carefully. And for me personally, the common denominator of each of your speeches was currency. Currency meaning standard. From my perspective, Bologna processes is to create standard across Europe to make the movement of students and of research as smooth as possible. And now let's look at details. When we have, and now I look from the perspective of Koźmiński. For me personally, as a rector, it's very easy to create, for instance, double degree programs with Portuguese grade schools, with schools from UK, and let's say also from France sometimes. But sometimes also because of the problems with the common currency, it's not so easy at all. I give you one simple example. In France, you have Grand École. In many other countries, you don't have it. You have bachelor, for instance. And now, how about creating a double degree diploma project on the level of bachelor when you don't have a bachelor degree? So on the top level of Europe, we have great marketing claims, great visions like common system, let's go fully international on international scale. Let's create one simple standard. But when we go on domestic regulations and the influence of policymakers, I think Cecile mentioned that, here come problems. Okay, here come problems. Second thing, and I think I'd like to refer to what Patrick said and Eric before. I think we are as let's say the sector of education, when you think about academic freedom, about advancement, about development of research and so on, we are in a very difficult stage, which means, from my perspective, huge impact of, I wouldn't say bureaucracy, but of measuring things on the activities of researchers and teachers. What I see is that according to present rules, the teacher, the researcher has a lot of additional duties on their shoulders, which are not in fact linked with their value creation. And that creates huge tensions because those people have huge talent to create value. The problem is that we impose on them, which means we impose on universities, huge bureaucratic measures to measure things, which, and here's the question, are really necessary to measure. It's not the time right now to go into details, but what I want to finish that part with one sentence is that creating single currency is to create standard, is to make things easier and smoother. I have the impression that we went too far because we created standard, but after the standard, we have to create 3 tones of documents, papers, and regulations, which proved that we created the standard. Besides, we are all in culture of, I call it, obsession of control, especially in the present times when we are in digital transformation, everything can be easily measured. So we put on ourselves, on our shoulders, a lot of additional responsibilities to measure things. The problem is that, for instance, it's so hard to measure value of teaching. And it means that the whole system is distorted because when you look at, for instance, rankings in business schools, you don't have a measure of teaching. You have the measure of research. But if you don't have the measure of teaching, then the ranking don't put it in the scale, then the whole system is distorted because everybody focuses on top tier research and we forget about education. That is the example of business schools, okay, where the measure of teaching is not included, or it is included according to old rules, meaning the payroll, I mean the salaries. So is it really responsible, talking about, I'm referring to Patrick because he mentioned that, is it really responsible for a school to say that we are great because our alumni earn a lot of money. Is this really that what we are for? I mean, to get people and to make them successful and measure the success by the number of euros or zlotys or dollars they achieve. So to finish that part, I'd like to say that the idea is very romantic and great, meaning let's create one system which is understandable for all and which is acceptable for all. But then when we go into details, there are a lot of pitfalls and problems which for some time were operational, but right now they are on a top strategic level of problems and questions like what we as universities are for, all right? And one last sentence at that part, I have the impression that Bologna process and generally the idea we are talking about right now is the best exemplification how hard it is to create one Europe, all right? The ideas are great, but then we go into details and suddenly the regulations are like, no, you cannot do it in France. Yes, you can do it in Norway. No, you cannot do it in Poland. And then your hands are tied because the President Macron gives great ideas, but we are those guys who actually have to fill in Excel files, write 3 tons of papers, and then see that actually this project is not feasible to do because of several reasons. So I think the direction we are going in is perfect. I am 44 years old and I am totally impatient. I'd like those things to go much smoother and faster, because I look at what is happening in other industries. When 10 years is like ages. I mean, changes happen right now very quickly. And I have the impression and I'm a bit worried that we in research, in education sector, we may think that they will wait for us, but they will not wait for us. I mean, people are changing their behaviors. Digital transformation is happening quickly. We have to be agile. We have to be fast. We have to take very fast managerial decisions. And the question is, what are the regulations for? To help us or to kill our energy?
Right. So if we take the passion for education and weigh it with that mountain of bureaucracy and administration that Gregor is describing. Cecile, I'm sure when you started teaching in a secondary school and later as a lecturer at St Andrews, it was the love of the exchange in the classroom and not the thought of Excel spreadsheets and mountains of paper. But so often the devil is in those details. You even notice it at the student level as you think about mobility and the idea of apprentissage, the idea of alternating between school and employer, not just schools and exchange programs, as Greg was describing. How does that throw up the barriers to the vision that you have for the sort of educational experience you want your students to enjoy?
Yeah. Well, first, the bureaucracy didn't kill the passion. The passion is still here. Thank God. In Bologna, we have half of our students studying in apprenticeship programs. So we're a small school with around 1,000 students. That means that we have 500 students in apprenticeships at all levels, from bac to master. And the rest is full time. So to offer mobility, which I think is extremely important in an education and periods of mobility. We have no problems finding partners in other schools or universities. To full-time students, okay, they can leave 2 months, 3 months to internship or to a period of study. It's my next thing to sort out. That thing is to find a way to offer a mobility which is not too bureaucratic to students that are apprentices. They ask for it. It's not easy because you're signing a contract with a company, and then you say to the company, goodbye, I'll be leaving for 3 months somewhere else. That's not easy. The credits as well. There's also a question. The evaluation of the period of mobility. How do you translate the input of this mobility within the apprenticeship program? And I'm talking about mobility programs during the curriculum, not after graduation, because there is one, it's Movilab. But I'm talking about how to offer these mobilities with readable credits. It's not academic credits, it's professional credits, because they will probably go to another company. There's also another question. We have more and more young people asking to do their apprenticeship in Europe, not in France. Okay. There are countries that are super attractive for them. For example, I'm talking about, motion design and digital images. For example, the Netherlands. They have amazing young startups that are offering a lot of opportunities for a young person who wants to learn in another way, learn a language at the same time, etc. And there's no real clear path how to do this. And there's more and more of them, and I understand them completely, that are asking for this kind of experience within their learning period.
Mm. Now, as we think of stakeholders, Eric, in the case of Paris-Saclay, there's an EU level of this, but your ambition to bring together universities, centers of research excellence, the relationships that you then have with industry. How important is that in bringing together so many distinct and perhaps complementary voices? How important is that to the groups of stakeholders, including students and researchers? Do they just want to think, well, with this one big family at Paris-Saclay, and we don't want to know about the administrative details, which puts pressure on you to provide a seamless experience? Do you think that students, as they look at the institution, they worry about what happens in the background?
Well, difficult question. No, I don't think so. I don't think that clearly, I do believe that the students are aware that we build a quite ambitious project, and they rely on that also. And for example, I can consider an example, a very clear example. The doctorate degree is jointly delivered since 2015. By the university, by Paris-Saclay University. Because even before this was the first object to be merged within all the faculties, the engineering schools, and so on. So, and clearly the doctorate, the doctors, so the doctorate, the PhD candidates, and after the doctors are strongly aware about the fact that they come from Paris-Saclay, and when we advertise the activity of the university, even abroad, at any opportunities, they are very aware of that, and they are very happy very pleased to help to the promotion of the university activities. Yeah, clearly. Mm-hmm. Now, if I may, I can come back also on previous remarks. I agree with Patrick about the visibility, the necessity of the visibility, and again. Among what was discussed was pointed out the fact that perhaps the European landscape is a little bit complicated and a little bit tricky to push common actions, because we have a certain administrative burden and many tasks and so on. I'm aware that not all the European universities are engaged into European alliances, but once again, this is probably a very specific tool that is very helpful. because indeed that projects are pilot projects in which we accept to have this administrative burden to not to know everything. These pilot projects help us a lot to solve the issues, to see them concretely, because we see them from the bottom also. From okay, these projects are pretty top-down projects, but at the same time, we rely on the education communities and now the research communities, and we see the problems arise from the bottom, and we identify with them, and in a pretty protected association consortium with given partners, four partners in our case, so 5 partners within the alliance. We can address step by step these problems. We can discuss with the other universities, the other alliances within a specific dedicated work group. And we have also some connections, informal connections with the European Commission, which is also driving that action, but which is very eager to know what comes back from the university alliances, because the European Commission itself, and sometimes we see representatives at the round tables of the European Commission and so on. The European Commission representatives themselves do not know absolutely clearly what they have to conduct. They know the main directions, but they do not know what are the concrete actions that can help to do so. So I think that beyond the European University Initiative, maybe all the European universities, probably that most of the universities, at least the big universities, have strongly active international policy. But I would suggest that in terms of visibility, indeed, we can follow, and this is also what we do within our institutions. We can follow the concept of the European Commission, especially the one which is called the SWAF, the science with and for society. Everything that we do should be done in the software with having in mind that what we do is either for the students or for the companies or for the education, for the long-term basic science and so on. We have to address more or less all that topics, but we have in mind that we do it for and with society. And if we want to increase the visibility, I think that what we have in France, for example, Fête de la Science and so on, this kind of every opportunity to communicate with the society, to rely on it, and also to have some feedback, to rely on to involve also the citizens, the associations, the NGOs, and so on. It's very good for the visibility of the universities. And if I may, if we can, for example, in some years, maybe not now, but have in all our degrees some courses given by other university partners. In that case, for all the families, for all the students, it would make clearer that the European dimension is something to be considered. I think it would also increase the visibility of the European level, let's say.
Right. Patrick, you've built a career in a very dynamic ecosystem within Europe, within France, Grenoble, whether for technology and innovation, life sciences, for business, it's a thriving environment. Do you think with the sort of visibility that Eric is describing, but also whether it's students, researchers who bring their own sense of purpose, to match you and SWAF and, the sort of the vision of the institutions, do you think that they begin by looking at a European level, or do they very quickly drill down to look at regions within Europe to identify their core strengths and how that might fit with their own sense of purpose and passion?
Well, actually, that's exactly the question that we try to solve in our application for what we call in France the Initiative of Excellence. I should be very cautious because we are in the final part of the evaluation.
Don't say anything that might.
There was the visit of the jury last week, or this week actually, and we have the final audition for June. But in a sense, the answer is that I would say what we tried to do was to make something global and local. It has to be local because it has to be based on the strength of the ecosystem. the fact, for instance, that we have in Grenoble the microelectronics like Cytec or ST Microelectronic or some other big companies, and also the fact that we have, well, for decades, a good school of engineers or people also who are very much involved in the how to make innovation and how to make that, how to go to the market to some extent, is something very important. And actually it has to, of course, everything is international, research is international, and but in a sense, the fact that you prepare the engineers, the technicians, the researchers for the local ecosystem is quite important. And this is, of course, something which is crucial for a small region, like a small city like Grenoble. I mean, when you think to it, it's very small, actually. It's very compact, which is an advantage, but it's quite small. On the other end, I mean, research is international by nature. And by the way, there is some concern with the research dimension of European university alliances, because by definition, it's going to be, it can be very fruitful in the sense that it can create a very clever research network, which would not exist if the alliance was not created. But if I look, for instance, to the top partners in research of Grenoble, I mean, they are in UK, they are in the US, and in some major university in Europe. They are not. This is less the case for Darmstadt or Aalto or Lisbon. I mean, but anyway, I think that's the problem for all university European university alliances. But to come back to what creates the visibility and the attractiveness for students and researchers, I would say, considering the Grenoble example, that, well, first of all, the Alps is a good advantage. It's a great asset. We have to be honest. And also that probably the students, even more the researchers, will take into account the critical mass of research that we have here and the fact that our teaching is based on research. And we try to do that for all degrees. Of course, that's more the case for master and PhD, but even for the first cycle, what we call the bachelor. It's not exactly bachelor, but it's important. And the last thing is that in terms of visibility and attractiveness, what we experience in Grenoble for the last 10 years, I would say, is the fact that even if you have prestigious higher education institution or research institutions, you still have a problem in France, at least, with this, which I would call fragmentation, because you don't have a brand that can be shared and made visible by everyone. And this is exactly what has been done in Saclay or in Grenoble or in PSL or in many other places in France. Actually, it's to be at the standard for universities, at the international standard. I mean, you are from Princeton, from Harvard. Well, now you're going to be from Saclay or Grenoble Alps, and that's good. And I think that's good not only for the rankings, we might come back to that, but that's good for the students, that's good for the teachers, for the researchers, because that's simply a question of belonging, of course, but of belonging to some prestigious institutions that make an added value to your diploma, an added value to your research, and is more and more attractive. And I think that's, for us at least, that was the main lesson that we had in the last 10 years, I would say.
Right. Well, I must wish you good luck with the EDEX jury.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure that will continue to go well. You talk about that combination of global and local, global. And of course, Gregor was saying, well, perhaps what's happening in Norway as compared to France, as compared to Belgium, Italy, and other countries. Axel, you actually work on more of a micro level rather than that bigger macro European level. Do you find that in working with the Bavarian region and with institutions in France, that at that level, that gives you more agility in the sort of partnerships that you're then able to pursue, rather than trying to always embrace bigger European ideals? We know how difficult it is. Brexit was an example of getting 27 or 28 countries to speak with one voice. So do you find that it can be more agile and productive to have that dialogue at a more micro level?
We have to deal with small universities, very small universities, and the same thing in Bavaria and in France. So I know quite a lot of problems. The problem of visibility, for example, was mentioned quite a lot. And I'm always very astonished that sometimes politics and university strategy is strategic thinking is about too big to fail. So we will put a lot of universities together. A process what happened in France a couple of years ago with these press, for examples, and afterwards we will be ranked in the famous ranking on the top places. This is typical political thinking, I think so. We are running behind the rankings, and we are so pressed by the rankings all over. It's very funny. And we always think this is a very American way of thinking as well for the competition of universities. But if you see like Caltech, I mean, they're small but beautiful. And in France, you have very small universities, École Polytechnique, which is a major research university in some areas, and they're tiny, really tiny. So just give them a right to coexist with others. And one of this problem, just Eric mentioned or Patrick mentioned, the label. So if you put always a new label, in France you call it the millefeuille. So this is the pastry inside. This is very complicated to reinvent always the idea and to promote the idea on the international level. You told us that Cambridge and Oxford, they put 800 years of work inside to be on this level. And sometimes our politicians expect from our universities that they will do it in about 10 years or something like this.
Yeah.
Another thing, from this bilateral perspective, yesterday I was on the local advisory board of Eurotech Alliance. This is an alliance which combined TU Munich and École Polytechnique in this European university networks. And they were talking about quite a lot about the social impact of education nowadays. And we heard this a couple of times before. So what is technology in society, ethical questions, and so on. And somebody shared this, because on this local advisory board there are quite a lot of partners from industry inside, big, huge companies. And they just showed a slide where a questionnaire of our German Association of Engineers. What industry expect from a profile of an engineer? And it's not good for a laugh. On the first date, ECTS competence. And really at the bottom of this list, you find intercultural, ethic, social competences, and so on. Mm. And that was just a shock, because what we are thinking now, which is really the gain of Europe, it's this kind of creativity and our social standards and how to develop these social standards in our dialogue. But if there's a response at the moment, the enterprise, this is a good question in the economy. Mm.
Yeah, well, you've raised the idea of creativity, which I'll come back to Cécile. But before I do, with rankings as part of today's discussion, they've been alluded to in many different ways, how they can distort a sense of purpose. Greg, when we connected ahead of the round table, you said in very blunt fashion, we've become slaves to the rankings, but you believe that there are harbingers of change and have identified the BSIS system that looks at the regional impact. It touches on what Axel has introduced in terms of that wider social good. Perhaps you can share your own perspectives on rankings. You perform well in them, but you do feel that they've sort of distorted the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, my answer to that question is the answer to your speeches, dear colleagues. In some moments, you mentioned things like brand, like visibility, like recognition, like trust, and prestige. Some say, and in some literature you can find it, that in fact in education, especially in business education, you are not on the market of education, you are on the market of prestige. So people apply to particular universities not because of superb knowledge they can achieve there, it's because of the positioning of the brand of that institution. I think the best homework for all of us would be to watch the documentary on Netflix about 2 years ago. It was very loud, noisy situation when there was a huge corruption in top American universities because famous actors and businessmen paid a lot of money just to put their kids in those schools. So that's what I mean by saying that education and research may be in some cases just additional value to the value of the brand of the institution you're representing. And obviously, this is the question whether we like it or not, and whether we can do something about it or not. What I can say from the perspective of business schools is that, yes, we are all, as business schools, slaves of rankings. Rankings like Financial Times ranking, like QA by subject, like Times Higher Education, and so on and so forth. But I think also knowing other big universities, they are also slaves of rankings. So I think we as community of researchers, of teachers, of managers in education, we may undervalue the position of rankings because, and I said it to you, Matt, if, for instance, in business schools, Financial Times decided that among the parameters of indicating that you are good would be, for instance, that you are great in dancing, believe me, couple of thousands of schools around the world suddenly would have the top tier dancing courses. And I'm not joking, it works like this. Whether it's good or not, I think it's good. You know why? Because I see that in the creators of those rankings, there is a huge awareness of the changes which happen in the world. So, for instance, there is right now in business schools, there is a huge stress put on the aspect of impact of business school and responsibilities, especially social responsibility. What I mean by impact, because this is one of the sexist words which are used right now globally in business schools. Impact. You are very prestigious school because your researchers publish in top tier journals. It's great. You will be ranked very high in journals, in the rankings. The question is, what is the real impact of those publications on society, on business world, on the local community, and so on and so forth? And right now there is this shift coming that rankings and accreditation institutions ask you to use tools which will allow you to measure your real impact on society. I give you another example. In many rankings, how internationalization of the school is measured. It is measured, for instance, by the number of nationalities you have on campus, or by the ratio of international students to all students. Is it a good measure or not? Well, it is. It's simple, it's flat, it's short-sighted. What would be the good measure? Measure coming, for instance, from business school impact system provided by EFMD, where you can see how much, for instance, because it's one of the parameters, how much money those people from other countries leave to the local community, meaning, for instance, approximation of the housing, of this monthly spending, and so on and so forth. So you can measure internationalization by the number of students, but you can measure also by the impact of the internationalization or on the local, national, or global economy, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that this is the perfect measure. I'm just showing you the perspective, right? Branding and the recognition is also about the trust. So we may look at this as, again, distortion of reality, that everything becomes commercialized. But on the other hand, if you are really long-term oriented on the building of the value of your brand, then you probably wouldn't distort it. You would try to do everything to bring value to the students and to the community and to the research work, okay? So it's more about the responsibility of the university, how much, I mean, you are short-sighted or long-term oriented. So to sum up, I would say that rankings we are slaves because people need rankings, because people need authorities to tell them who is good and who is bad. So we may say this is terrible because somebody controls actually our situation. But on the other hand, I think it's good because, as I said, I have the impression that among ranking institutions, there is a huge awareness of the changes which are happening around, which means they are thinking or actually already preparing new ways of measuring the success of business schools, which means that very quickly business schools will be more, I would say, up to date to the reality. Cecile said something very important in her last speech. She said something about full-time students and part-time students. Let's think deeply. Does it make sense that we still have those two separate dimensions? I mean, think about you using Netflix. I'm not the lover of Netflix, but think about how it works right now. I mean, you need flexibility. Think about LinkedIn Learning, I mean, the educational tools. What does it mean part-time? It means that I can use this application on Saturday from 9 to 15. No, I can use it wherever I want. People right now, young people are very agile. They do many things at the same time. So is it really, I mean, I understand what is part-time and full-time, but is it really still like set to the contemporary world? Because what does it mean part-time and full-time? It means that I will have to decide at some moment that, well, I cannot provide for those particular students more courses on Saturday because then I wouldn't be able to give them diploma, which would be full-time. So again, I'm coming back to the regulations and to the present reality, which is changing dramatically. And it's all about trust which society has to education, okay? It's all about the trust which society has to the research, because society has to see what is the real impact of the money which government gives to institutions, what actually it gives to them, right? So I think we are in a moment of a huge changes, which are not like, changes in regulations or changes in creating networks. It's more about the paradigm change of what actually universities are for and how they should work, because the competition comes. We see that, we have diplomas, right? We provide diplomas, we provide education, and we provide status, meaning prestige. And let's think about it. Do young people still need diplomas? We hear stories about it. We hear stories. People need competences, skills, knowledge. Well, I'm not just quite sure that we still have the monopoly of providing to the students and to the society that what other institutions not from educational sector can provide. Okay.
Right. No, we'll see how that evolves with Google and many others. You're a joy as five panelists because you listen to one another. That provides a natural lead into others and may not agree. And obviously, encourage you to pick up on what your other panelists have said. Axel said that small is beautiful, which is certainly the case at Gobelin. Cécile, you know, your graduates win the Oscars of the animation world, and Pixar and others that queue up to hire your graduates. And yet, in this world of rankings, there's no measure for a beautiful small school like Gobelin. You're sort of outside of the program. So you would actually like to see a ranking of what was sort of the creative fields.
From someone like who's completely absent from the rankings, we are invisible.
Because it's so hard to measure your activities. That's why you are invisible.
No. I'll explain. It's a technical thing.
Okay.
There's an internet publication ranking animation schools. Generally, animation schools are very young. You know, Gobelin is a very old lady. We're more than 50 years old, but it's exceptional. Generally, animation schools are around 15 years old or something like that. And they're not part of universities. Most rankings rank typical university programs. But animation schools, you know, animation was a little bit of a hobby on the side before it became a job, a profession. So the schools have been built incrementally, growing with the industry, experimenting other things, and mostly evolving with the technology as well. So we're a school where we don't fit the criteria for being ranked. We're not from a university. We're not a grande école. We're not even anymore a professional school, because now we're Bologna, and we have more and more people doing, you know, asking to do bachelor and master. And the industry is also asking for more years of training because the level of skills is rising. So at the moment, there's a small publication in the US ranking animation schools all around the world. So we're completely dependent on that small publication. And as an applied school, we would like to be, you know, somewhere in the ranking, and that's very, that's very typical of French little schools that have been built like this. For example, our main partner is CalArts, and we have also another partner, the Arts Center in Pasadena. They're formatted as universities, so of course CalArts and Arts Center animation departments are ranked. We have been ranked in this small publication for years now as first school in the world. Okay, but I'd like to be, you know, in the main rankings. I'd like to be more visible. I'd like to have more this legitimacy. And this visibility and in the rankings, and also rankings are also a way of evaluating yourself. You know, where am I? Okay, Gobelin is you can't lie. You know, if when you're releasing a film, the film is either bad, so or good. So it's not like you can you know, lie on a CV. You have to expose yourself, and so the film is either good or bad. But what about the teaching? What about, we want to develop research? We have a UX lab. We are doing all sorts of activities, and these activities can't be assessed or can't be shown in a ranking because we're not rankable. So that's our issue. We're slaves to rankings, whether we are in the rankings or not in the rankings.
Yeah, but it shows, sorry for interruption, but it shows how the market is is not, structured. Everything changes so quickly, down to the top, and putting some regulations from the top actually doesn't represent the reality right now.
Right. Eric, from your perspective, having broken into the the Shanghai rankings at number 14, like a Michelin-starred chef, it's probably far more difficult for them, rather than getting that third Michelin star, to lose a star. So now that you've had this global recognition in a ranking, does it get more difficult for you? Do rankings take on even greater importance because you've achieved that success? And now internally you ask yourselves, well, how do we keep this top ranking?
In fact, first we have been very pleased to see that ranking in last August, for sure. This is the first time that a French university can reach such a ranking into the international rankings. First, so for sure we were very, very proud, because also it was the conclusion of the previous periods of transformation from let's say 10 years of transformation, discussions between the faculties, the engineering schools, the research organizations, and so on. But clearly, the rankings are not the first goal of this merging and transformation process. We are very, very, very pleased about that ranking, because it brings us some additional visibility, and we have already been able to measure that even with the COVID period. Things have been much more difficult, but we have seen the trend in terms of number of applications from the international students and so on before, let's say, the COVID period. So clearly, and even the researchers, and even the number of universities throughout the world that contacted us in order to sign MOUs and so on, agreements. Okay, which we have not systematically done, of course. Okay. Now, clearly, and I was myself during my summer vacation last August when we had the news of the ranking of the university, and I clearly heard since the beginning our president Sylvie Rotaillot announcing it, expressing her point of view at the France Info radio channel, and she clearly stated what is the policy of the university. The ranking is not an end by itself. We do not work only for the ranking, for sure. We do not work. We have a global, long-term, sustainable strategy, and we build an ecosystem in the south of Ile-de-France, and we do not want to balance and to choose our action, long-term action, depending on the rankings, for sure. So we have received that very good news, especially in some topics like the mathematics. We are first, for example, ranked at the first place through the world in mathematics, and at very nice places also in physics and so on. But now we have a long-term policy of ongoing transformation with our internal organization, and what we want to do is to build the university again to the university of 2030, the Paris-Saclay University. We have a 10-year long-term strategy in mind, and the rankings will be what they will be. Let's say, okay, we are. If, for example, next year the ranking is the Shanghai ranking is a little bit less good, for example, it would not be a big trouble for the university. We do not target it as a specific important goal. Now, in terms of visibility, it can help us. And this is also what we try to rely on to build our long-term attractivity. But we are also aware that the young people, especially the young people, in fact, are very sensitive to some values like the sustainability, the sustainability, the development, the lifelong learning, and so on. This kind of values which are promoted at the scale of the European societies, and also by the European Commission, and also by the national scales and so on. They are the strong basis on which we want to build our strategy. Clearly, the rankings are a consequence and not the specific target. But honestly, if of course the rankings value the university, they can be helped, they can be useful for absolutely for sure for the attractivity of the international attractivity of the university. Right. It also gives us some visibility at the national scale. It's much easier also because we know that in Europe, of course, we have the degree of freedom we have of the European scale, the European Commission, the programs of the European Commissions and so on, but also the national scales and even the regional scale are still very important. And having that kind of visibility with respect not only to the family, the citizen and so on, but also to the regional and national scales, and perhaps European scale, but also including the regional and national scales, this visibility is very important also.
So if the Financial Times does include criterion that involve tango, and business schools all take offer dance lessons, I actually feel that would be a very positive thing if we all knew how to dance. But Patrick, if we're all just stuck with the different criterion that Times Higher Ed, that QS, both organizations based in and around London have devised for these measures, you use the word in the early parts of the discussion, differentiation. And if we all tried to be the same, how much we would lose. It's what makes us different, of course, that can make us so attractive and so strong together. So as we approach the end of the roundtable, my big question to you, where do we go with these rankings? Do we try to break them down? Do we come up with alternatives to them to provide the visibility that Eric and Cécile have talked about? Talk about measures of what we're so good at. Where do you see rankings going?
Well, first of all, just let me come back to what has been said, I think, by Cécile and by Axel and Greg also. In a sense, what is good in the ranking is something that we find also in the standardization and normalization. Just to come back to a very short story, I was involved with Jacques Biot, who is the former head of Polytechnique, in a report, an advisory report to the Ministry of Higher Education and Research on what we call in France the bachelor. And the bachelor actually covers many different things, with some things linked to RNCP, like Cécile mentioned, and something coming to very high-profile bachelor, for instance, in the business schools. And that was a sort of survey on that. It was very interesting, actually, to look at this very great diversity. But what we also found is the fact that, okay, it's maybe it can be bureaucratic, as Greg mentioned, and that's a problem. But on the other hand, if you only trust the publicity, the advertisement of some school that prepare for bachelors, then most of the population is lost. So in a sense, that's also something which have to take care. There is a higher education system, and we have benefit from that also. Coming back to the rankings, I think something that we did not mention but is important, I think, is the fact that when you take, for instance, the RVU, the Schengen ranking, is essentially based on research. There is very, very little on education and nothing on student life and so on. And if you look at some sort of progression of the French institution like Saclay, like Université de Paris or PSL or even Grenoble, because we're on the top 100 of Shanghai, it's essentially linked, not exclusively, but essentially linked on the fact that the highly cited scientists coming from the National Research Organism were included in the evaluation. So in a sense, well, that's good, because that means that fragmentation is a little over and that push on the ranking. That doesn't solve the problem of reputation that you know very well in your ranking, and which is probably important. That doesn't solve at all the question of quality of education. Now, what is the future for that? I think there is one major problem, at least for those ranking relying on research, because when you look at what is for instance, for Schengen ranking, it's nature, it's science, and it's the major journals. And on the other end, we are talking of open science. We're talking of different assessments of the career of the teachers and the researchers. So there is a sort of contradiction that we will have to solve in the near future. How do we want to assess science? Is the way we're doing that currently is good? And of course, it has been said by Greg and my others that we have a major problem for assessing the quality of education. And just to finish, I think also something that has been said, which is extremely important for that sort of assessment. Of course, we need KPIs for sure, and we need to have evaluation, and that's probably something which is beneficial for the French university, for instance, to evaluate the quality of research or even to try to evaluate the quality of education. But on the other end, as Greg said, we also have the question of skills and competences that are not only covered by diploma. And for instance, the initiative of the EU on micro-credentials is extremely important for that type of problems. So, I mean, it makes very complex the evaluation by rankings, by definition. And I'm not sure that there is a uniform solution or a unique solution. I would say that it's a sort of tension currently existing. I think that's quite beneficial. Maybe we are slaves, but we are slaves who actually hope to be more independent and more competent in the near future.
We've discussed autonomy, freedom of speech. We've talked about mobility. We've talked about regional impact, job creation and regional wealth creation. We've talked about dance classes and Axel, we even talked about the millefeuille, which when you have 3 or 4 French panelists talking about food at 5 o'clock in the afternoon is a very dangerous subject. Our minds start to wander. So with the time that we have remaining, as we reflect on the last 10 years, and as Greg said, industry won't wait for us to take too long. If I can ask each of you, just for one final thought of what you wish for in the next 10 years for European higher education. Axel, starting with you.
Perhaps 2 points. The first point is lifelong learning and how to integrate people from outside the university inside the university. So that will be a major point for university and university boards. Another point is we are still thinking in this stereo system, education, research, and what will be with innovation perhaps. So do we have to rethink as well the valley of death and what we are doing with this valley of death for innovation, which is coming outside from university inside to economy. I think these are 2 points which will definitely be very important for universities in the next couple of years.
Right, and we'll be able to come back to you in 10 years, and I'm sure that you're right on those too. Greg, what would you add on your wish list?
Be careful, I have one. No, I have a couple of them. First, I give you very short the story. Well, I believe in the system. I tell you why. I'm married for 20 years. I have 3 kids, and I met my wife during Erasmus program in Holland when we met. So this is the story which I always say to students and to everybody. This is the best case where the system works because we are together for the last 20 years and we plan to be another at least 20 years. So system works, all right? But now let's put it simple. Well, it's hard at 5 o'clock to give big sentences. But I would say that I would love Europe to convince our societies that the world we are living in right now is about to cease. And we really have to all start educating ourselves from the very beginning. So I think still in Europe, we have the perspective of a fat cat, that we are in a very, comfortable world and we may think 1 or 2. No, actually, we are at the brink of a huge change in civilization, the whole civilization. And Europe should be responsible as institutions, as European Union, should be forced to build the awareness of our societies to change it, which in fact means to start on a massive scale introduction and promotion of the lifelong learning perspective.
Well, you met the challenge. That's a big idea for us all to take away and integrate into our thinking. Cecile, what is your wish for European higher education?
I'm going to talk as an international relations director. My perspective. First, I think we should be more open and attract more people to university with rethinking our formats as well. I see a lot of students all over the world. They are self-taught. They are not self-taught. They stop. They start. They go to work. Then they have to study while feeding a family. All sorts of things. So there are more formats to develop. I think we can be very creative, very imaginative, maybe less bureaucracy. That's true. But inventing new ways and being more creative to attract more people and to have less separation between university and the community. Really open places for spreading knowledge in less formal or ways. And I agree that the world is completely changing. And there's another thing that is very important for me because it's really the point of focus of my strategy. We're talking before about global and what the students coming in are bringing to the local community. I'm very attentive to that, but I'm also now really thinking about, I'm producing graduates, then I let them go, okay, in the world. So what sort of capacity can the knowledge of Gobelin bring to other local industries? We work a lot with started really working a lot with the African continent, and we see the diversity of the ways of learning there, and the fact that we are not anymore in a sort of competitive model, like I'm going to go to Accra or Johannesburg and rent a building and put my flag and say it's Gobelin, come on, and then go when I can't stay anymore. But being part of the local community, bringing and transferring our knowledge and discussing, exchanging, because we have to, we can teach people, but we also have to learn. And we also have a responsibility to bring values and help the local ecosystems to develop. And our graduates have this responsibilities as well. We have graduates now from Africa that are back to their cities, industries, etc. And that's really a message that I want them to bring. I want them to give back the knowledge that Gobelin gave them.
Right. Eric, I'd like to give you a metro line, which will be soon. I think that's in the next 10 years, right? The French metro will reach the campus, but what's on your wish list for the 10 years ahead?
In fact, my first wish would be to pursue and to develop even more the internationalization of the universities. Especially at the European scale, but not only. Of course, we are connected with many spheres and many regions of the world, as just said, especially with Africa, but not only. Within Europe, my feeling is that the universities have a new role to play, and perhaps it would be a kind of second step after the first step, the launch of the Erasmus program, the Erasmus Plus project program in 2013. Now we have a new step to pass and to proceed, because of course there are Erasmus Plus exchange programs and so on. They could be developed much larger scale. So this is my first hope for the next years. I do believe also that the universities may still progress in terms of service and connection to the society throughout all the dimensions. Lifelong learning has been already pointed out, but also connection and with the private stakeholders, private companies, addressing the society challenges and so on. We are not in our castles, isolated castles. We do not work in our laboratories like that what can be imagined by but anyway, we still have to progress in terms of connection with the society. This is my feeling. So I do hope that we can progress in that direction. And indeed, the openness of what we do, the value that we share, that we promote, that we represent, also is something also to continue to emphasize and to make progress into the society. So again, the connection with the society and being accessible to all population, perhaps using the micro credentials, using perhaps new collaborations, new way of so new tools, perhaps to promote, to imagine, and to being even more open.
What you're all suggesting in a world, of course, in the last 12 months of a global pandemic that has, had us all more isolated than ever, to place that emphasis on connection makes great sense. And Patrick, perhaps a final thought.
As open as possible, as closed as necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I'll take my hat of EUA board member and responsible also for the CPU committee for the European Committee of CPU. I think I have 3 wishes in 3 dimensions. The first one is that university must be much more than they are now, the place where lifelong learning is actually implemented, and that has been said. The second one is, and that's extremely important in Europe, that we combine inclusiveness and excellence. And that's a bit of a challenge. I mean, I always listen that from the EU responsible, but that's critical and that's difficult. And the third one, which has something to do with that, is social impact. Mm. And social impact is not only important at the level of our own university, it's also critical for the European citizenship feeling. And that's critical for future, I guess.
Right. There's tremendous generosity in what you all wish for your institutions, their role in society. And there's been tremendous generosity with the time that you have taken to share your insights and thoughts in the last hour and a half. It's 90 minutes where Netflix couldn't keep me this much engaged or that much thought-provoking material, I promise you, Greg. So only a tango class, of course, would do. Pascal, what a wonderful group that you've brought together for today's discussion. Thank you, Dankeschön, to all of you for your participation. Perhaps just a few final words from you, Pascal, before we sign off.
So, yeah, what can I say? Thank you very, very much. It was very, very interesting. I'm emotionally touched by everything you said. I felt, and I think the audience also felt it, the passion for education you have. And we are going to try to wrap up what you said in this roundtable in a little article. And Cécile gave me the idea of the title of this article: "Not rankable, not bankable." If you agree with this, with a question mark. Yes. And so on behalf of Maison de l'Europe and the Université Franco-Allemande and CEP, thank you very much for all you said today, and we hope to see you, because we aim to offer an event like this once a year. So we hope to count you in our invites. So thank you very much, and have a great day, and keep the passion, and keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.